Today we're going to dive into a fascinating and scary story that promises to mess with your mind. You will meet Leandro Montejo, a man who went through a near-death experience and received a shocking message about what will happen on August 23, 2024. Before we start, tell me in the comments which city you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these stories that will make you think twice about what the future holds. My name is Leandro Montejo, and I have a story to tell that goes beyond anything you can imagine. I am a simple man, born in Cuba and raised in Miami. I came to the United States at a young age, bringing with me only the determination to build a better life. It wasn't easy, but with a lot of effort and hard work, I managed to settle here in Miami. I've always been a practical man, with my feet on the ground. I believe in science, in concrete facts. I never paid much attention to these stories about supernatural experiences or things like that. For me, everything had a logical explanation. At least that's how I thought until that day. I work as a mechanic. I have my own workshop. It's honest work that allowed me to buy a modest house in the suburbs of Miami. Nothing too luxurious, but it's my little place, you know? A place where I can relax after a hard day of work. I'm 45 years old now, and I can say that I led a very normal life until that moment. I woke up early, went to the workshop, came home, sometimes went out with friends to have a beer. On weekends, I liked to barbecue in the backyard, listening to Cuban music and remembering my homeland. My family? Well, most of them stayed in Cuba. My father, Don Emiliano, came with me to the United States. He lives nearby, and we see each other often. My mother passed away a few years ago, and I miss her very much. I have an aunt, Marisol, who was like a second mother to me when I was a child. She stayed in Cuba and, unfortunately, is no longer with us. I never married, nor had children. Maybe because I'm always focused on work, or maybe because I haven't found the right person. Sometimes I think I should have started a family, but that's life. Things don't always go the way we plan. Anyway, that was my life. Ordinary, calm, without great emotions or extraordinary events. Until that day when I decided to renovate the floor in my storage room. Who would have thought that such a simple task would completely change my worldview? Look, I'm not one to believe in destiny or things like that. But what happened to me? Well, it's hard to explain. I'll try to tell it as best as I can, but I'll warn you right away, it may sound crazy. I still have a hard time believing it myself, and I was the one who lived through it all. So, get ready. The story I'm going to tell you now will challenge everything you believe about life and death. I know, because it challenged everything I believed. And even after all this time, I'm still trying to understand what really happened that day. It all started on a hot July day. Miami, you know how it is, right? The heat is killing. I had decided to change the flooring in my storage room. It was a room at the back of the house where I kept a lot of junk. Old tools, spare parts from the workshop, some souvenirs from Cuba. The wooden floor was completely finished, full of cracks. It was impossible to keep that place clean. So, one Saturday morning I woke up early, had my coffee and went there, determined to solve that problem once and for all. I started moving the heavy boxes, piling everything in a corner. I was already sweating like a convict, and I hadn't even started the hard work yet. I grabbed my old crowbar and started ripping out the boards. The wood was so rotten that some came out without even applying force. Others, well, those took work. I was so focused on what I was doing that I didn't even notice time passing. When I realized it, it was almost noon. That's when it happened. I had just ripped out a particularly stubborn board and stepped back to see the progress. I didn't see the nail. It was there, protruding, waiting for a careless foot. And it was mine that he found. The pain was immediate and intense. I uttered a curse in Spanish that would make my late mother turn in her grave. I looked down and saw the damage. The nail had gone through the sole of my old sneakers and gone deep into my foot. The blood was already starting to stain the sneakers. Carefully, I removed my foot from the nail. The wound didn't look that bad, but something told me it wasn't a good thing. I remembered the stories my father told about the dangers of tetanus. At the time, I thought, Leandro, you idiot, why didn't you wear your work boots? Limping, I went to the bathroom to wash the wound. The cold water stung, but at least it cleaned the blood. As I dried my foot, I began to feel a pang of worry. What if that nail was rusty? What if I got tetanus? I tried to calm down. Don't be dramatic, Leandro, I thought. It's just a little hole for nothing. But my Aunt Marisol's voice echoed in my head. Better safe than sorry, my son. Reluctantly, I decided it was best to go to the hospital. After all, it's better to waste a few hours in a waiting room than risk something more serious, right? Little did I know that that seemingly simple decision would be the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. I grabbed my car keys, locked the house, and drove to the nearest hospital. The whole way, I tried to convince myself that I was exaggerating. It was just a small domestic accident, nothing big. But something inside me knew that this would not be an ordinary day. And boy, was I right. I arrived at the hospital feeling a mixture of shame and worry. Shame for being there because of a bruise, and concern because, well, you never know, right? The emergency room was packed, as always. Children crying, elderly people coughing, the usual. I filled out the form and sat down to wait, my foot throbbing inside my sneaker. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally called my name. The doctor who attended to me was Dr. Ernesto Delgado, a young guy with an accent that reminded me of home. He examined my foot carefully, asking questions about when my last tetanus shot was. Mr. Montejo, he said, the wound doesn't look serious, but considering the circumstances, we're going to give him a booster dose of tetanus shot just in case. I agreed, relieved that it was nothing serious. The nurse came, administered the injection, and that was it. I thought that was it, that I could go home and finish my floor work. But Dr. Delgado insisted that I remain under observation for a few hours, just to make sure there was no reaction to the vaccine. Reluctantly, I agreed. I lay on a stretcher in the hallway, the constant noise of the hospital around me. The hours passed slowly, and I began to feel tired. I thought it was just boredom, you know? But then, I started to notice something strange. My vision got a little blurry. I thought it was sleep. I rubbed my eyes, but it didn't improve. And then the dizziness came. It was as if the entire world was spinning around me. I tried to sit up, but my body felt too heavy. Hey, nurse! I tried to call, but my voice was weak. I looked at my foot and saw that it was swollen. The area around the wound was red. My heart started to beat faster. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Dr. Delgado appeared, his face a mask of concern. He spoke to me, but the words seemed distant, as if he were speaking underwater. I picked up some loose words. Allergic reaction, infection, penicillin. I saw the doctor take out a large syringe. I felt the sting on my arm, but it was as if it were happening to someone else. The last thing I remember is Dr. Delgado screaming for help, and then darkness. It was at that moment that everything changed, that my perception of reality, of life and death, was completely transformed. Because what happened next? Well, there are no words to describe it, but I'll try, because it's a story that needs to be told. What happened after I lost consciousness is something I still have trouble describing to this day. It's like trying to explain colors to someone who has never seen them. But I will do my best to share this amazing and scary experience. Suddenly, the darkness that enveloped me when I passed out turned into nothing. Literally nothing. There was no light. There was no sound. There was no feeling of being in a place. It was as if I had ceased to exist, but at the same time I was more aware than ever. In this absolute void, something strange happened. I no longer had a body, at least not in the physical sense we know. It was like I was just consciousness, pure consciousness floating in the void. And the most incredible thing is that I wasn't afraid. On the contrary, a deep peace enveloped me. All the weight of life, all the worries, fears, and anxieties simply disappeared. Then, in the blink of an eye, if I still had eyes, everything changed. Suddenly I was back in the hospital, but not in the way you're imagining. I was floating above my own body. There I was, lying on the stretcher, pale as a ghost. Doctors and nurses were running around me, shouting orders, giving injections, trying to bring me back. I saw Dr. Delgado pressing my chest, doing cardiac massage. My body was shaking violently, and there was white foam coming out of my mouth. It was a terrifying scene, but the strangest thing was that I wasn't afraid. It was like watching a movie, you know? I knew that was me down there, but at the same time I felt disconnected from that body. I tried to call the doctors, tell them I was fine, that I was up there, but my voice wouldn't come out. I tried to touch a nurse's shoulder, but my hand went straight through her. It was at that moment that the reality of the situation hit me. I was having an out-of-body experience. And then, once again, everything changed. The hospital scene disappeared, and I found myself transported to a completely different place. It was a room that seemed like something out of an old dream. The walls were made of aged brick. The solid wood furniture looked hundreds of years old. A soft, welcoming light filled the room. That's when it happened. A being of light appeared before me. I can't describe it accurately. It was as if he was made of pure energy, radiating a peace and power that was beyond anything I had ever experienced in my life. This being did not speak, at least not with words, but somehow, a message was transmitted directly to my mind. It was clear and specific. On August 23, 2024, a portal of spiritual transformation will open on Earth. This will be a time of great change, but also of intense tension and challenges. Prepare yourself, Leandro, as this will be a unique moment for your growth spiritual. But remember, it will take strength and resilience to overcome the difficulties that will come along with this transformation. The message hit me like lightning. It was a warning about a future event that would change the world. He spoke about a specific moment of great spiritual transformation, but also of great challenges. And I, somehow, had a role in all of this. The date stuck in my mind. August 23, 2024. I didn't know what exactly would happen on that day, but I knew it was important, that it was something I needed to prepare for, not just for myself, but to help others during this time of change. It was a huge responsibility, and I confess that I felt overwhelmed. How could I, a simple mechanic from Miami, play a role in something so big? How could I prepare for an event that seemed so beyond my comprehension? Before he could fully process what was happening, the scene changed again. This time, I found myself in a familiar place. Suddenly, I found myself in a room I knew very well. It was the living room of the house where I grew up in Cuba. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mixed with the sweet scent of garden flowers coming through the open window. It was exactly as I remembered, every detail in the right place, as if no time had passed. And there, sitting on the old flower sofa, she was, my Aunt Marisol. My heart skipped a beat. She passed away more than 10 years ago, but there she was, exactly as I remembered her from my childhood. She wore that light blue dress that she liked so much, and her face had that kind smile that always made me feel safe. "Leandro, my son," she said, her voice exactly as I remembered. "How long, right?" I wanted to run to her, hug her, tell her how much I missed her. But something told me that this wasn't possible. So I stood there, feeling a mixture of joy and sadness that I can't even begin to describe. "Aunt Marisol," I finally managed to say, my voice shaking with emotion. "What's happening? Am I dead?" She laughed softly, that laugh that always calmed me when I was a child. "No, my son, you are not dead. But you are in a place between the worlds, a place where we can meet." She got up and came to me. It didn't walk. It was more like it was floating. When she got close, I could feel the warmth of her love surrounding me. Like when I was a child and she comforted me after a nightmare. "Leandro," she said, placing her hand on my face. "I'm so proud of you. You've grown up, become a good, hard-working man. But now you have a bigger mission ahead of you." I was confused. "Mission? What mission, Aunt?" She smiled, That smile that always told me everything would be okay. You got a message, didn't you? About the times to come? I nodded, remembering the being of light and its enigmatic message. This is your mission, my son, to prepare yourself and help others prepare. Times of change are coming, and the world will need people like you, people with strength, with compassion. I didn't fully understand what she was saying, but I felt the weight of her words. But Auntie, how can I do that? I'm just a mechanic, an ordinary man. She laughed again, but this time it was a laugh full of affection and understanding. Ah, Leandro, you've always underestimated yourself. Don't you see that it's exactly because you're an ordinary man that you're perfect for this mission? People will listen to you, trust you, because you're one of them. I remained silent, trying to process it all. It was too much to take in at once. I know it's a lot, my son, she said, as if reading my thoughts. But you are not alone. I will always be with you, even if you can't see me, and there are others who will help you along the way. I felt tears in my eyes. Auntie, I miss you so much. She hugged me, and in that moment, I felt like a child again, safe in her arms. I know, my son. I miss you too. But I'm always watching over you, and now it's time for you to come back. Go back? But I don't want to leave, Aunt. I want to stay here with you. She smiled, but this time there was a certain sadness in her eyes. It's not your time yet, Leandro. You have a lot to do there. Your father is waiting for you. Before I could say anything else, I felt a force pulling me back. The room began to get blurry, the image of my Aunt Marisol fading. Remember, my son, I heard his voice for the last time. You are stronger than you think, and you are never alone. And then everything went dark again. I don't know how long I stayed in that darkness. It could have been seconds, minutes, or hours. Time seemed to have no meaning in that place. But little by little, I started to feel something. It was like I was being pulled back, like every cell in my body was being reanimated. First came the feeling. I felt the rough hospital sheet against my skin. Then the sound. Constant beeping of machines, muffled voices speaking quickly. And then the smell, the characteristic hospital odor, a mix of disinfectant and something else I could never identify. I opened my eyes slowly, the fluorescent light from the ceiling momentarily blinding me. I blinked a few times, trying to focus. I saw faces above me, expressions of relief replacing what had clearly been worry. He's back, I heard someone say. It was Dr. Delgado, his face tired but smiling. Mr. Montejo, you gave us quite a scare. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. A nurse noticed and offered me some water. The cold liquid ran down my throat, bringing immediate relief. Wait, what happened? I finally managed to ask, my voice hoarse and weak. Dr. Delgado explained that I had had a severe allergic reaction to the tetanus shot, complicated by an infection in the wound on my foot. Your heart stopped for a few minutes, Mr. Montejo. We thought we lost you. I remained silent, trying to process the information. My heart had stopped. Had I died? For a few minutes at least. And in those minutes, I had experienced something that went beyond any rational explanation. I looked around and saw my father, Don Emiliano, sitting in a chair next to the bed. His eyes were red and swollen. He had clearly been crying. When our eyes met, I saw relief and love in his eyes. Daddy, I whispered. He stood up immediately, coming to my side. He took my hand, squeezing it tightly. My son, thank God you're okay. I thought I lost you. I wanted to tell him everything that had happened, about the void, about seeing my own body from above, about the being of light and its message, about the meeting with Aunt Marisol. But looking at his tired and worried face, I realized that this was not the time. It's okay, Daddy, he said, trying to smile. I'm here now. The doctors did some more tests, checked my vital signs. Apparently I was out of danger, but they wanted to keep me under observation for at least another day. As they worked around me, my mind kept going back to the experience I had had. Had it been real? Or just a dream caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain? Science would say that was it. Just random synapses from a dying brain. But I knew, deep in my heart, that it had been more than that. The peace I felt, the clarity of the message, the love I experienced meeting my aunt. All of this was too real to be just a dream. And now, lying in that hospital bed, I asked myself, what would I do with this experience? How would I fulfill the mission given to me? And more importantly, how would I tell someone this without sounding completely crazy? I looked at my father, who was still holding my hand. I decided I would start with him. After all, if there was anyone who could understand, it would be him. But that would have to wait. For now, I needed to rest and recover. I closed my eyes, feeling tiredness taking over my body. But before I fell asleep, I clearly heard my Aunt Marisol's voice. "Rest, my son. You have a lot of work ahead of you." And with those words echoing in my mind, I fell into a deep, restful sleep. The next day I woke up feeling much better. Dr. Delgado came early to do an evaluation and was pleased with my recovery. "If you continue like this, Mr. Montejo, we will be able to discharge you tomorrow," he said with a smile. My father had gone home to rest for a while but came back right after lunch. He looked like he had aged 10 years that night. He sat next to my bed, his eyes still showing concern. "How are you feeling, my son?" he asked, his voice tired. "Better, Daddy," I replied. "Much better." We were silent for a moment. I knew I needed to tell him about my experience, but I didn't know where to start. How to explain something so inexplicable. "Daddy," I began hesitantly. "Something happened while I was, when my heart stopped." My father looked at me curiously. "What do you mean, Leandro?" I took a deep breath and started counting. I talked about emptiness, about seeing my own body from above. I told him about the being of light and his enigmatic message. And finally, I talked about my meeting with Aunt Marisol. As I spoke, I saw the expressions on my father's face change. First, surprise. Then, disbelief. And finally, a mixture of worry and, was it hope? When I finished, we were silent for a long time. My father looked out the window, lost in thought. Finally, he turned to me. "Leandro," he began, his voice serious, "you know I'm a practical man. I've always believed in what I can see and touch, but..." He paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "But there are things in this world we cannot explain. Your mother, she always said there was more between heaven and earth than our vain philosophy can comprehend." He took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't know what happened to you, my son. Maybe it was a dream, maybe it was real. But I know it changed you. I can see it in your eyes." I felt tears forming in my eyes. "Do you believe me, Daddy?" He smiled, that smile that always made me feel safe when I was a kid. "I believe you experienced something deep and meaningful, Leandro. And if it gave you a purpose, a mission, well, who am I to question?" I felt enormous relief. My father might not fully understand, but he believed in me. It was everything I needed at that moment. "What about Aunt Marisol?" he continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "Did she say she's proud of you?" I nodded, unable to speak. My father smiled, tears in his eyes. "Well, that I can completely believe. Because I am too, my son. Very proud." In that moment, I felt a connection with my father stronger than ever. I realized that no matter what the future held, no matter what mission I was given, I would not be alone. I would have my father by my side, supporting me, guiding me. And with that thought, I felt a wave of strength and determination invade me. I was ready to face whatever came my way. I was ready to fulfill my mission, whatever it was. The day of my discharge finally arrived. Dr. Delgado did a final assessment and, satisfied with my recovery, signed the release papers. Before leaving, he pulled me aside. "Mr. Montejo," he said, his tone serious. "What happened to you? Well, it's not something we see every day. Your recovery has been remarkable." He paused as if considering his next words. "I heard you had an experience while you were unconscious. I'm not a religious man, Mr. Montejo, but I've seen things in this hospital that defy medical explanation. If what you've experienced has brought you peace or purpose, hold on to that." I nodded, grateful for his words. "Thank you, doctor, for everything." My dad helped me gather my things and walked me to the car. The drive home was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we arrived, I was surprised to see that the storage room, where it all started, was clean and organized. New flooring was installed. "Your friends from the workshop came to help," my father explained. "They said it was the least they could do." I was touched by the kindness of my friends. It was a reminder that even in the most difficult times, we are not alone. In the days that followed, I tried to get back to my normal routine. I went back to the workshop, thanked my friends for their help. But something had changed. I had changed. The words of the being of light in Aunt Marisol constantly echoed in my mind. I had a mission, a responsibility. But what exactly did that mean? How should I prepare? And how could I help others prepare for something that even I didn't fully understand? At night, lying in bed, I went over my experience, trying to make some sense of it. The peace I felt in that void, the love I experienced when I met Aunt Marisol. All of that seemed so distant now, like a dream that fades when I wake up. But I knew it hadn't been a dream. It was real as the air I breathed. And little by little, I started to notice subtle changes in myself. I started to see the world in a different way. The small irritations of everyday life no longer affected me as much. I felt a deeper connection with the people around me, as if I could feel their joys and pains. In the workshop, I started listening more and talking less. I realized that often all people needed was someone to really listen to them. A customer came to get his car repaired and ended up venting about problems in his marriage. A new employee shared his insecurities about the job. In every interaction, I felt like I was in some way fulfilling my mission. I started reading more too. Books on spirituality, philosophy, psychology. Things that had never interested me before now seemed fascinating. Each book seemed to give me a piece of the puzzle, helping me better understand what had happened to me and what I should do about it. My father noticed the change. One night while we were having dinner together, he commented, "You look different, my son. More at peace, I think. It's like I've found something I've been looking for a long time." I smiled at him. "I think so, Daddy. I'm still trying to understand everything, but I feel more complete, you know." He nodded, his eyes shining with something that looked like pride. "Your mother would be happy to see you like this," he said softly. Those words touched me deeply. I thought about my mother, Aunt Marisol, all the people who had already left. Suddenly, they didn't seem so far away. The months that followed were of profound transformation, not just for myself, but for the world around me. The news on TV talked about climate change, political conflicts, surprising technological advances. It was as if the whole world was preparing for something big. And me? Well, I continued my journey of self-discovery and preparation. I started meditating regularly, something I would have found ridiculous a few months ago. But now, these moments of silence and introspection have become essential to me. In the workshop, I implemented some changes. We started using more environmentally friendly products and recycling more. Little things, but they made a difference. And most importantly, I started talking more to my employees and customers about the changes that were happening in the world. I didn't talk directly about my near-death experience, but he shared ideas about the importance of being prepared for changes, of taking care of each other and the planet. To my surprise, people listened. Some laughed and thought I was crazy, of course, but others seemed genuinely interested. One day, an older client, Mr. Rodriguez, asked me directly, "Leandro, what happened to you? You were always a good man, but now, it's like you have a mission. I hesitated for a moment, but then decided to tell him a simplified version of my experience. To my surprise, he didn't think I was crazy. On the contrary, his eyes filled with tears. "You know," he said, "I lost my wife 2 years ago, and ever since then I've had this feeling. Like she's still around, you know? I thought I was going crazy. But listening to you, maybe there's more in this life than we can see." That conversation made me realize that maybe my mission wasn't something grand or dramatic. Maybe it was simply that, sharing my experience, my new perspective, and helping people see that there is more to life than meets the eye. I started organizing small meetings in the workshop after work. Nothing formal, just conversations about life, death, spirituality, the future of the planet. At first, it was just a few curious friends, but little by little, the group grew. I didn't consider myself a guru or anything like that. Far from it. I was just a mechanic who had experienced something extraordinary and wanted to share it. But I realized that by opening this space for dialogue, I was creating something important. A place where people could talk openly about their fears, hopes, and experiences without fear of judgment. My father started to participate in these meetings too. At first, he was quiet, just observing. But over time, he began to share his own stories and reflections. Seeing my father open up like that, talking about his own spiritual experiences, was one of the most beautiful things I have ever witnessed. As time passed, I felt like I was getting closer and closer to something. I didn't know exactly what, but I had a feeling that something important was about to happen. It was as if the entire universe was aligning for a grand event. I started having vivid dreams, almost as real as my near-death experience. In these dreams, I saw people from all over the world coming together, sharing a collective consciousness. I saw the earth healing, people living in harmony with each other and with nature. But I also saw challenges, moments of darkness before dawn. I woke up from these dreams with a feeling of urgency, as if time was running out. I shared these visions with the group during our meetings, and to my surprise, many said they were having similar dreams. "It's like we're all connected," said Maria, a woman who had recently started attending our meetings. "Like we're all gearing up for something big." His words resonated deeply with me. That's exactly how I felt. One day while I was working on a car in the shop, I had an epiphany. The message from the being of light, the meetings we were having, the dreams. Everything pointed in one direction. It wasn't just about preparing myself or helping some of the people around me. It was about creating a network, a community of people ready to face the changes that were coming. That night I shared my idea with the group. What if we expanded this, I proposed. What if instead of just meeting here we started organizing bigger events, talks, workshops, retreats, something that could reach more people, help more people prepare for what's to come. There was a moment of silence and then excitement. People started offering ideas, suggestions. John, a yoga teacher who had recently joined the group, offered to lead meditation sessions. Sarah, a nutritionist, suggested workshops on conscious and sustainable eating. My father, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke. "Son, I think this is it. This is what you were brought back for. To bring people together to pave the way." His words hit me hard. He was right. This was my mission. In the months that followed, our little group grew into a movement. We started organizing bigger events, first in Miami, then in other cities in Florida. People from everywhere, of all backgrounds and beliefs, began to join us. We did not preach any specific doctrine. Our goal was simply to help people connect with themselves, each other, and the planet. We talked about consciousness, about sustainability, about love and compassion, and above all, about being ready for the changes that were to come. Of course, not everything was easy. There was skepticism, ridicule, even some threats from people who saw us as a threat to their established belief systems. But for every negative voice, there were dozens of people whose lives were being positively impacted by our work. And then one day I got a phone call that would change everything again. It was a hot summer afternoon in Miami. I was in the shop, working on an old car when my cell phone rang. The number was unknown, but something told me to answer it. "Hello?" I replied, wiping the sweat from my forehead with a cloth. "Mr. Montejo?" a female voice asked. "My name is Dr. Amelia Chen. I'm a researcher at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Consciousness. I heard about your work and, well, I think we need to talk." My heart accelerated. Something told me this was no ordinary call. "Of course, Dr. Chen. How can I help?" I replied, trying to remain calm. "Mr. Montejo, we are organizing an international conference on near-death experiences and global transformation. We would love for you to be one of the keynote speakers." I was speechless for a moment. An international conference? Me, a simple mechanic from Miami, as the keynote speaker? I don't know what to say, Dr. Chen. I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for something like this. I heard a soft chuckle on the other end of the line. "Mr. Montejo, your qualifications come from your experience and the impact you have had on people. We are not looking for academics. We are looking for people who have lived something extraordinary and are using that experience to make a difference in the world." As she spoke, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was as if everything I had been through, everything I had done in the last few months, was leading me to this moment. "The conference will be held in 3 months," Dr. Chen continued. "We will have participants from all over the world, scientists, spiritual leaders, people who have had near-death experiences. We believe we are on the cusp of a major shift in global consciousness, Mr. Montejo, and we think your voice needs to be heard." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Aunt Marisol's voice echoed in my mind. "You have a mission, my son." And now, here she was, performing in a way I never could have imagined. "I accept, Dr. Chen," I heard myself say. "I will do my best to share my story and what I learned." "Excellent," she replied, joy evident in her voice. "I'll email you all the details. And Mr. Montejo? Try. Thank you for having the courage to speak out. The world needs people like you now more than ever." After I hung up, I stood there for a long time, the wrench forgotten in my hand. I looked around the workshop, at the familiar tools, the cars, the smell of oil and grease. This had been my life for so long. And now I was about to take a step into the unknown, a step towards a future I could barely imagine, but somehow knew I was destined to face. I picked up my cell phone again and called my dad. "Daddy," I said when he answered, "you won't believe what just happened." As I told him about the call, about the conference, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. But most of all, I felt a deep sense of purpose. I didn't know exactly what the future held. I didn't know what challenges I would face or what changes would come to the world. But he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face whatever came his way. I was ready to fulfill my mission, to make the difference I was called to make. And with that thought, I went back to work, my heart light and my mind focused on the future that was to come, a future that, in some way, I would help shape.